What happened in Brooklyn? The idea that he's mad because he hasn't been traded, that's really the source of the anger. That does not pass the smell test to me. Does it pass the smell test to you?
I think this is more chaotic right now than I think it was 2 years ago with Ben Simmons.
There's one question that I would ask Ben Simmons, just one. Are you afraid to get fouled? Welcome to the Lowe Post Podcast in September. It's been a while. Nothing happened. Well, some things kind of happened, but really nothing happened. James Harden, still a Sixer, still unhappy, repeating for emphasis that he will never play for a team with Daryl Morey involved again. Let me repeat that, Bobby Marks. I shall not, will not ever play for a team with Daryl Morey again. Still a Sixer. Damian Lillard, still a trailblazer. The Miami Heat, still waiting for the phone to ring, looking at the phone. Looking for Joe Cronin's caller ID to come up. Nope. Still no, it's not him. Still nothing. Team USA lost to Lithuania. Who cares? We beat Italy today by 1,000,000 points. We're in the semifinals. We're in the Olympics with what is, I don't want to be rude about it, but kind of our B team or B plus A minus team. The A team is laying in wait for Paris 2024. France, hosts of those Olympics in 2024, pooped right out of the group stage. Rudy Gobert, I think, had like 4 points in the entire freaking thing. That wasn't great. They get Wembanyama, though, and maybe Joel Embiid. Who knows? I don't know. There's a lot to talk. Oh, and Giannis. Giannis said some stuff. Bobby Marks, how are you?
I'm good. It's the first week of September, better known as for those guys who's asked to be traded. Oh, my. I have 3 weeks and I have to come to training camp. That's what some people want to bring their kids back to school, or they've already brought their kids back to school. But for the Damian Lillard, James Harden of the world, they're looking at the calendar saying, oh boy, media day is 3 weeks away and I've got to go to training camp.
Did you run into Jimmy Butler at all at the US Open?
No, my seats were not in the same area where Jimmy Butler was. I didn't have the same access.
You know, here's my tennis take. I like that the U.S. Open crowd is a little boorish, okay? And I don't have any sympathy for the players who are like, oh my God, they're so noisy and impolite. They don't know how to be proper tennis fans. Someone made a noise while I was trying to serve. How could I possibly execute my toss that I've done 4 million times with somebody burping in the crowd? I like the boorish fans. Are you a boorish fan? You make a little noise in there?
Oh, we were on the grandstand watching Ben Shelton, who is the up and coming youngster, play mixed doubles, and it felt like you were at a rock concert. It was tremendous. Like, it was great. The atmosphere was great. You go into Ash, it's a little bit more of a, don't sit down until the point of, the change of point. And so no, I'm not a heckler. I'm not a heckler, but I enjoy cheering on.
Let's start with James Harden, who, while I was blissfully chilling out in Croatia, called Daryl Morey a liar and vowed twice that he would never play for a team that Daryl Morey is involved with ever again. Of course, Daryl Morey is the president of basketball operations of the Philadelphia 76ers, and James Harden is on the Philadelphia 76ers, and it will have to report to Philadelphia 76ers training camp in a matter of weeks. The NBA then reopened an investigation into, or I guess opened a second investigation into James Harden's entanglement with the Philadelphia 76ers. And according to the reporting and what has now been made public, fined James Harden $100,000 for what the NBA deemed approaching the level of a public trade request, and signaling that there was at least one type of team that he would never ever go to. And this comes on the heels of course, the memo they sent about Damian Lillard's agents trying to dissuade teams that are not the Miami Heat from trading for Damian Lillard. And then, according to the reporting, the robust investigation, found that James Harden's source of anger, his motivation for calling Daryl Morey a liar, his motivation for his declaration that he will not play for Daryl Morey's team ever again, was based on a the notion that he expected or was told that he would be traded very quickly after stunningly opting into his contract for $35 million on July 1st, and of course has not been traded. And so that is where we are with James Harden. I will just open the floor to you. Well, before I do that, people, of course, remember that James Harden signed a 1+1 with the Philadelphia 76ers in the offseason of 2022 at a number significantly lower than his max. I believe $12 million lower.
Correct.
Bobby.
Yeah.
Roughly. And that just so happened to have given the 76ers the flexibility to sign PJ Tucker and Daniel House, former Rockets with James Harden, to contracts of various exception amounts. The NBA did investigate that whole series of events, docked the Sixers 2 second-round draft picks, not for promising James Harden any pot of gold at the end of that 1+1 rainbow, but instead for negotiating early with PJ Tucker and Daniel House Jr. If the NBA's current/recent investigation is indeed concluded with that $100,000 fine, it was never explicitly stated that that fine marked the end of the investigation, Bobby, but my educated assumption is that that was it. Then there has still been no finding that the 76ers, either in the 2022 offseason or during the 2022-23 season with James Harden's opt-in, opt-out looming, made any sort of explicit agreement or promise to pay him any sort of maximum contract of any length or any kind of contract at all. And so that's where we are. Unhappy James Harden. I'll leave the floor open for you. What are your takeaways from this whole soap opera, and or what do you expect to happen in the next plot twist of the soap opera?
I would say that an investigation is never concluded. It's never finalized as far as, as far as they can say he's been fined. I'm just going back to
this is why I have asked the NBA pointedly, is it over?
No,
and I haven't gotten any clarity yet.
And here's why. And I'm going to go back to 2013 when I was in Brooklyn when we got investigated for Andre Kirilenko. And remember, Kirilenko had opted out of, I think it was like $10 million, and we signed him for the tax mid-level. At that point, it was like $3 million. And when you have a Russian owner and a guy leaves $7 million on the table, you're going to get investigated, right? Like that's the reality of it. And I remember because I was the point person when the league sent the notice. They sent a letter, right? And I remember getting the letter saying we have found that the Brooklyn Nets have found no wrongdoing. They're not going to be fined. There's no draft pick penalties. However, this investigation is not, this is not final. Like if we find any more information down the road, we will reopen the investigation. I
have been told that
yes.
We always reserve the right.
Yep.
If something new comes across our desk to reopen an investigation, even into the same specific discrete topic that we already investigated.
Yeah. So even though they were, docked, 2 second-round picks a year ago, and all of a sudden, like, let's say, when James Harden goes, goes national and says that, Daryl Morey is a liar, the league is looking at it. Well, what is he lying about? Right. Was he lying about, was there a contract promise? Was there a trade? I think, Harden's belief is that certainly when he opted in, that he was eventually going to be traded. I don't know any general manager that would tell a player, yes, we are going to trade you, and no matter what. Like, I'm sure there was a conversation where it was like, we will trade you if it benefits us. Like that's the conversation that you're going to have. And I think with James Harden, and we've talked about it, with the withholding services clause that's in the collective bargaining agreement, that's something that's not new. Like I saw a lot of people write about like, oh my God, the new CBA's got all this bite in it that, there's this clause in there and stuff. Like, no, that's something that was there.
I was the first one to write about it. And I said in that story, this is not a new clause. It's been in there for a long time. And the clause, to be clear for people who may not remember or know about it, is if you are in the final year of your contract, which James Harden is, and pointedly Ben Simmons was not when that situation happened, and you withhold services from your team for 30 plus days, now I'm not sure exactly when the clock on that starts. Maybe that team has the ability to block you from entering free agency the following offseason or signing with any team anywhere in any league on earth that pays you money to play basketball. So James Harden is coming to camp. His representatives now know about that clause. If they didn't before, they probably did. He's coming to camp. The only question is, at what effort level is he coming to camp?
Yeah, his agent has been on record saying that, he feels that James Harden's going to have an MVP type year. Now,
yeah, I'm just gonna come out and say I don't see that one happening, Bobby. Don't see James Harden being in the top 3 of the MVP.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the clock starts, I believe it starts on training camp. Once, that's basically the first day of official business when training camp opens, and I guess it's late September here. I think it's interesting with Harden in that, we talked about the withholding clause, and that, basically both sides need each other. I really do. I think if for Philadelphia, if they're going to move him, or for Philadelphia to be competitive this year, they're going to need something of value of James Harden, either himself or something that's coming back in a trade. The Harden situation is interesting just because we've put Philadelphia, I guess, has put a lot of eggs in the basket of cap space, right? There's no Tyrese Maxey extension because his free agent hold next year is at $13 million, and they want to preserve room. What's interesting, and I kind of did a little research on, is that Daryl Morey, the president of the Sixers, is not known for building rosters with cap space. Like, it's just not there. I mean, he signed Dwight Howard, Ryan Anderson, Eric Gordon. Those are the 3 players that he has signed here. He's had cap space 3 times during his career, including back in Houston here. And I'm writing something for next week. And I said, like, what Philadelphia has to be careful is that based on what happens with, maybe guys like Pascal Siakam, guys who are extension eligible, they might be staring at the 3 top free agents might be players on their own roster with Maxey, Harden, and Tobias Harris. Like, you have to be, I know Drew Holiday, and we'll talk about him down the road, and LeBron's got a player option, and there's some other players, OG and an OB, guys like that. But that's what you have to be careful with, is that they're relying on $65 million in cap space, or 70, whatever the number is going to be, to go into free agency next year. And I think if you're going to move Harden, you want to go out and get guys that are under contract, right? Like, expirings really don't do anything for you here. And but for Harden, and I agree with you, Harden's got to come into camp. And I think, there's no benefit of, for him to basically sit out and hold out, because we've talked about the financial ramification. Then, and then there's the Embiid factor, right? I mean, that's the thing that's going to hang over. I just don't see this being a, what do we call it, a gap year or a bridge year to 2024. I don't see Joel Embiid sitting through. He's like, you know what? I've got 4 years left. I'm okay being the 6th seed. I'm okay being a play-in team. I'm okay with 2 out of the last 3 years of complete chaos. Ben Simmons 2 years ago, now James Harden. Because he's in year 1 of this supermax, as you know, doesn't mean anything.
On cap space, Daryl Morey has gone on record and said, the NBA is entering a period where there are just not going to be good teams with cap space. There's just even the Tim Bontemps a few weeks ago on the Hoop Collective kind of urged in a scorching take, a singeing my eyebrows through my phone take, said the Cavaliers should trade Donovan Mitchell because he's never going to sign an extension there. And the sort of the other end of that, which I don't believe Tim said, was, well, the Knicks are lurking as another place that he has historically wanted to go. The Knicks are probably not going to have cap space to sign Donovan Mitchell. So Daryl Morey has said, we want to be the only good team with cap space. That's a powerful weapon for us. To your point about taking guys back under contract, if they decline options on everyone, including like Paul Reed's non-guarantee, if they just wipe away that and find a home for Tucker somehow as an $11 million player option, they can take back in a James Harden trade like $30 million of salary. So let's say a Norman Powell who's 20 plus 30 might be a little much, actually, because Powell plus Mann together gets them out of a max contract slot, but maybe 25 million and still have enough for one max slot. They don't have two max slots. As we've talked about, the Philly 2 max slot thing is a myth. They're close-ish, but close doesn't get you to 2 max slots. So, we'll talk about the Clippers, who are really the only team that I think has really been in this. I know that Howard Beck and others have stated that there may be 2 or 3 other teams that have been sniffing, investigating, and certainly if you talk to the Sixers, they have reason to say, oh no, there's a broad, frothy James Harden market out there. I really don't think there is. I think it's been mostly the Clippers. I'm sure other teams have checked in. We'll get back to them. So on the Sixers side, I have a couple of thoughts. Number one, I think you just sort of indirectly nailed it. Part of the reason why this has to be so frustrating for Philadelphia and their fans, probably even more for their fans, is that I'm looking at the Eastern Conference right now. And yeah, we had a 3-2 lead against Boston and blew it. Yeah, our 2 best players, as they have generally done, underperformed in the biggest game. Again, particularly Harden, who had 2 great playoff games and just stinkers all around that. Well, I'm looking at the East, I'm thinking, all right, Boston just sort of reoriented their entire roster around a big man who's missing the FIBA World Cup because of his plantar fasciitis, and he's always had foot injuries and leg injuries and stuff that he's got to deal with. We'll see how that goes. Boston's going to be awesome either way, right? As long as they have those 2 guys and they re-sign Jaylen Brown and all that, they're going to be awesome. But, there's a little uncertainty there. Milwaukee, for all this Harden melodrama, the most important thing that happened this entire summer was Giannis Antetokounmpo coming out in the New York Times and essentially saying, I'm not signing my extension when I'm eligible, which was not really news. And I'm not signing it, period, if I don't think this team is all in to win a championship. And more importantly, in a realistic position to win a championship. Now, they were the number 1 seed last year. Giannis got hurt in the first game of the playoffs. They end up losing to Miami in horrific fashion, 4-1, despite Giannis coming back. They're going to be in the inner circle of contenders this season after re-signing Brook Lopez, re-signing pretty much everyone relevant. Middleton, Giannis is healthy after having knee surgery, I believe, in the offseason. But anytime a good team, and especially a good team that has had a couple of disturbing playoff eliminations in the last around a championship run, right? Every other playoff elimination, two of them in particular, have been disturbing. The Celtics won when Middleton was hurt. They played great, fine. Then they won the championship the year before that. A team with coming off a playoff performance that makes you question, what happened here? Where was the fortitude of this team? Why did it just totally melt down in fourth quarter after fourth quarter and freeze up and just glitch? Anytime a team like that has something like what Giannis said hanging over them, I get very, very nervous, because that makes for a very pressurized season, a season where every 3-game losing streak is Armageddon, where just the flap of the butterfly wings can cause chaos. And so I'm looking at a world where, hey, the 2 teams that were kind of better than us last year in the regular season, at least, there's a world in which they're worse this year or shakier or more uncertain. Miami still doesn't have Damian Lillard, lost some guys off their team, Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, etc. If we could just get our shit together, yeah, we haven't made the conference finals in a million years. And yeah, we've got some issues of big games, but it's there for us. And you know what? They don't have their together. And do you know why they don't have their together, Bobby? I don't really know why, but it's just every goddamn year with the Sixers. It's just constant. It's been 10 years of just chaos almost every offseason. Last offseason in 2022, ironically, the one they got docked draft picks for, was a great offseason. Relatively copacetic. They made smart signings. Everything was good. They aligned up their team, blah, blah, blah. Other than that, it's just chaos all the time, from Sam Hinkie getting shoved out, maybe not provided enough support when he got the job anyway. Now we can quibble with a lot of the stuff that Sam did and how he did the job, but still, the The Colangelo era was kind of messy. There was like the Brett Brown is the GM interregnum, and how involved are some of the owners? There was hiring Doc Rivers before hiring Daryl Morey. There was I don't want to say mismanagement, but there was a Jimmy Butler versus Brett Brown versus Ben Simmons thing that they decided to resolve by jettisoning the clearly most valuable of those three people in terms of building a championship level basketball team and getting Al Horford and Josh Richardson in return, essentially. It's just been a mess constantly. The Simmons thing, now the Harden thing. We don't even have to get into Fultz and Zaire Smith and all the stuff that has gone wrong. And I guess the question I would have, Bobby, is at what point do we start asking questions about the ownership of the Sixers? Like, for every other franchise, if they had experienced 10 years of this, people would be like, wait a second, who's actually running this? Like, where does the buck stop? If this were Mark Cuban, and it has been Mark Cuban for more serious reasons than this, people would start asking questions about the owner. Why is there just never any talk about Josh Harris and Dave Litzer and all the other guys who are running, and Michael Rubin? Like, what was the Michael Rubin thing? Michael Rubin's owning the team. He's posting on Instagram with Harden. Now he doesn't own the team anymore. He sold his interest in the team. Why is there never any talk about this? And by the way, they've won lots of games. I don't really think that that's a huge thing to be proud of, because when you tank 4 seasons and draft 1 to 4 every year, in like 8 years, you should win a lot of games. Like, the minimum is like being a good team, which they've been. So that's one of my questions. It's kind of a black box ownership. Why are the guy just bought the Commanders?
Well, and that's the thing, is now how invested right now you're a lot of your attention is going to probably go to that Washington team. And listen, anytime you go through 2 out of the last 3 years, two of your best, outside of Embiid, basically have wanted out. You've gone through Brett Brown, Doc Rivers. Now you're onto Nick Nurse here. You went from a team that was a Kawhi Leonard, buzzer beater to the Eastern Conference Finals, to a team now that we're questioning as far as what this team will look like a year from now, and none of us know. And I think, as you said, like, that's the hesitancy. Like, they can go out and move Harden, right? You can go out and move him probably for 3 expirings in a draft pick here, but there's Harden controls so many different variables here, that if you're the ownership group, I think you do have to look yourself in the mirror. I think if you're Daryl, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. Like, what have I, what has gone wrong here? Because it's been, really, as you said, like, post Harden trade in was it February of 22 up until, I guess, this past offseason, there was a calm, right? There was a somewhat of a calm here. And you're a game away from the Eastern Conference Finals, and now we're back to chaos, right? Like, we're back to like I think this is more chaotic right now than I think it was prior than 2 years ago with Ben Simmons.
And as you said, the stakes are everything. The stakes are the whole era of the Drew Holiday trade on the 2013 draft until today. That's the stakes, because that trade kickstarted everything that has led to an MVP center taking you as far as he's taken you, which is not as far as he wants to go and as the team wants to go. If they mess the Harden thing up, or if Harden messes the Harden thing up, or the basketball gods punish everybody by messing the Harden thing up, it could all be over. And all of that losing and all of the team building could end up with all the number 1 picks who forgot out to shoot gone other places. The high pick who really worked out maybe requesting a trade to another place, and you being right back where you started 10 years ago without having made a conference finals, and having to watch your beloved homegrown superstar center who you embraced the town, and I don't think wants to be traded out of Philadelphia. Now, that said, again, like I've been saying for months, like, keep an eye on it. This is the situation to talk about, is Joel Embiid. I think in his heart of hearts, he'd love to win in Philly, just like Damian Lillard would have loved to win in Portland. it doesn't always work out that way. And like you might, the whole thing is at stake, and you might have to end up watching that dude play for team X, Y, and Z in the Eastern Conference in the end years of his prime. Like that's what's at stake.
Well, and we're sitting here in early September, like a month from now or 2 months from now, when camp starts and we get into the regular season in Philadelphia, let's say is 3-7. Like that's a lot different than sitting here, in early September on a Tuesday, Wednesday morning here. Like then that gets real here. And I just think like the whole cap space thing is like, I love talking about it, but it's fool's gold. I mean, how many good teams? I know Durant going to Golden State, and that was certainly because of the spike. But how many teams, Denver, when you look at Milwaukee, teams that have won championships here, certainly that Toronto team, the Lakers in the bubble was different. They did get a LeBron with cap space, but I guess Brooklyn getting Durant and Irving that year that's like hitting the lottery. Like that does not happen here.
Well, the Heatles.
The Heat back in 2010, and that turned into 2 championships, certainly. But like they go out and say, you know what, we have $65-70 million and we're going to get 2 guys, or we're going to get 3 guys here like that. If you're relying on that, man, like,
well, I think it's in fairness to Daryl and the Sixers, I think it's a little different if in the door you have an MVP and a second cornerstone player in Maxey. And I don't think they're off base to believe that Maxey has another big level to hit and could be a cornerstone kind of player. I don't know what that means. I don't know if all NBA seems like a lot, but if you told me he made a few All-Star games, a couple All-Star games, I could see that. I have a couple other things on the Sixers.
Well, here was one thing. I don't think, and in fairness too, to Phil, like I don't think they have a choice, right? Like I don't think they have a choice to go the cap space game, just based on how their roster is built. When you look at the 2 guys with Maxey and Embiid, and then everyone else will be a free agent. Like if your intent is to bring Tobias Harris back, then that's fine. If your intent was to bring back James Harden back, that's fine. But if your intent isn't, then you have to go out and look at what's available outside of those 2 players.
The irony is, you just said if your intent is to bring James Harden back. And this is what I wanted to go back to. The idea that, so the NBA's investigation, finds that maybe because James says this in the investigation, I don't know the particulars of it. We're not privy to that. Finds that the source of James Harden's rage, the source of the motivation for being so mad at Daryl to come out and publicly shame him that way, is that he hasn't been traded since opting in on July 1 or June 30, whatever date it was. That just doesn't pass the smell test. It just does not pass the smell test. He opted in and was already mad. The reporting when he opted in, Woj said it has likely played his last game for the Philadelphia 76ers. He was already mad. He was mad before he even had a chance to not get traded quickly, which raises the question of like, okay, what's he mad about? And so what he's obviously mad about is he did not get a contract offer that he expected to get at the time he expected to get it. What does that mean? I don't know the particulars of what that means. It could just mean the very simple thing of, he wanted to negotiate early. He wanted the Sixers to negotiate early before the bell rung. They didn't, having been dinged for doing so the year before. They didn't, maybe out of worry that whatever negotiating they would have done with James Harden, the Rockets, who were looming as a threat all season, theoretical or real, who knows, would have trumped that offer. I don't know. The Sixers obviously have been, the first NBA investigation found no evidence that there was any kind of promise of max deal here, years here, whatever, any deal at all. But clearly the idea that he's mad because he hasn't been traded, that's really the source of the anger. That does not pass the smell test to me. Does it pass the smell test to you?
No, I mean, I think what he's mad about is that he declined a $47 million contract, and opted out and took $14 million less for them to go out and sign PJ Tucker and Daniel House. What the thought was that if he played at a high level this year, and he certainly had a good year, that he would be rewarded with a long-term lucrative contract here.
And I think they were going to offer him.
Well, and
a good something good and big. I don't know if it would have been as long as he would have wanted or as much as he would have wanted, but there was going to be something on July 1st or whatever it was.
What's ironic is that if this was a year from now, we probably are not talking about this situation, because under this new collective bargaining agreement, starting next year, you can start negotiating with your own free agents once the NBA finals are over. So what happened with Philadelphia was that they're basically in a holding pattern like everyone else until June 30th, right? So, and they, based on them getting dinged last year and getting investigated with tampering, they said, you know what? We're going to go by the book here, right? Like, we are waiting. You know what, James, if you opt out, we'll negotiate a new, something new. And his thought was that, well, what is that new? You didn't know what that number was. And that was the hesitancy of becoming a free agent. And that's why he took the, secured, whatever that $35 million number.
And also, clearly he's had his eye on the Clippers, both as a place to end up next season and a place that may be the most lucrative place for him long term. And there was no way he could have got signed and traded to the Clippers, because the Clippers are so far through the second apron or whatever that they can't do that. So this was his one way to try to get to the Clippers. The other thing, Bob, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. What else were you going to say?
No, that was it. That's all. The rule change. The rule change would have given him that, that a 12-day window to get something done if this was a year from now.
You know what I never really got a satisfactory answer to? What happened in Brooklyn? Like, if I'm the Nets, I'm rooting for like a Watergate level investigation of everything. Like, what happened? Why did he want to go to Philly all of a sudden? Was it really just Kyrie being unavailable? The vaccination thing, everything being a mess? Like, I feel like I never really got a satisfactory answer to, like, was it really just, Philly's interest in him was well known by that time. Obviously, they were a candidate to trade for him before the Nets did. The Nets swooped in and got him. I just felt like that it's ancient history now. The Nets are incredibly well set up, considering the disadvantageous position they appeared to be in, getting off of their three foundational stars, the greatest team that never was. So it's all ancient history. That Brooklyn is set up. I felt like I just never. There's a lot of noise, and I felt like I never got a real answer to it.
Well, and it's funny because it wasn't like that was that 21-22 season. Like, Harden was tremendous. I mean, I remember those Christmas games. I think it was the Lakers and Clippers. I mean, he basically, when Kyrie was out and Durant, I think, might have been injured, like, he basically carried that team. So what happened from like January 1 to, so it was a month to all of a sudden for him thinking, you know what? I'm not going to sign an extension. There's too much chaos here. I want out. Who poisoned? It's basically like, who poisoned the well? Right? Like, who got him thinking that this was not going to be the place to be?
Now, I have heard, to come back to present times, that, obviously, if he reports to camp, everyone's going to be watching. Like, is this going to be a situation where he's loafing, he's unhappy, he's pouting, he's undermining the team? I have heard that his relationships with his teammates remain good. He likes playing with Embiid, although there's obviously been this push and pull of, like, do I get to play Harden ball or do I have to play set up Embiid ball? What's the right balance? I've heard, I think the reporting that his initial meetings with Nick Nurse went well is legit. Like, there are parts of that organization that he likes. So it'll be very interesting to see. And you mentioned the Clippers, and, the Clippers have 2 first-round picks to trade. They have Terrence Mann to trade, and they have Norm Powell, and then they have a bunch of expiring contracts that, frankly, don't really help the Sixers that much. I'm sorry. Apologies to Robert Covington and Marcus Morris. They're 2-3 years ago, they were nice plug-and-play role players around a Joel Embiid. That 2 or 3 years later, they were on the fringes / out of Ty Lue's rotation last year. Maybe they'll get back in it this year. Robert Covington talked to my buddy Law Murray about that a couple weeks ago, about how he's going to have a comeback kind of season. I would bet that Daryl Morey values those 2 first-round picks, especially if they're unprotected, higher than Terrence Mann or Norm Powell, even though he can take one of those guys and still have max cap room this summer. Just because his whole thing is what gets me the star. And I think just as when he traded Kyle Lowry for a first round pick way back with the Rockets in pursuit of the star that became James Harden, his thought was a very juicy draft pick is more valuable on the trade market than an okay to good player. And Terrence Mann's an okay to good player. I think that's actually selling Terrence Mann short. I think he's going to be really good and would fit well with the Sixers. But my point is, if the Clippers were to put both first round picks in with Mann, without Mann, even without maybe, I think there's a deal somewhere. I think there's a 2-team deal that exists that the Sixers would do. I don't think the 2 teams have been anywhere close to any of that kind of deal. And which is why I think the only play I see for the Sixers here is bring him to camp, hope the better angels of his nature take over, if that's even a possible thing. He plays pretty well. And the Clippers and some other teams with high expectations sputter over their first 20 games and get desperate. And then we'll get the offer that we need. I that seems to be the off-ramp here, unless I'm missing something.
No, I think for the Clippers, I think if you're looking at them, is James Harden worth 2 first-round picks? And I think for them, who else out there? Who's going to be another disgruntled guy out there? Like, so if we use both, we've got nothing left, right? Like we're basically tapped out. Like, I think it's going to be interesting. Like, what happens in Chicago, like with like DeMar DeRozan, for example?
He's extension eligible now, right?
He's extension eligible now. 4 for I think 170 is the most. He's going to be a free agent next offseason. If you're looking at like that situation, does DeMar DeRozan fit better than James Harden with this group here? At maybe a little bit less of a cost. Who knows what the hard number will be next year here. And I think going down the 2 first round pick route is like, that this is kind of, who we are again, right? Like we kind of started to restore our draft equity a little bit post Paul George trade. And both those guys, George and Leonard could be, of course, free agents because they've got player options here. Do we have to keep a little bit in the, that powder still dry as far as, not moving both? Because as you said, like if they put both, if they would ever put both on the table, I think there is a deal, certainly to be made.
Well, I think the Clippers, it's very simple. You have to ask yourself a question. Do we still think we're good enough?
Yeah.
And I think reasonably, the answer has to be no. I just think you can't count on Kawhi Leonard and Paul George being healthy together long enough, sustainably enough, and at the right times. And yeah, you can go through the Western Conference and say, who are we terrified of? Even the Nuggets lost the 2 most important players off their bench, arguably, 2 of the 3 anyway. But, everyone in the West is good. And it's one thing to say there's no juggernaut that we're terrified we can't beat this team 4 out of 7. Even Phoenix, like if you're the Clippers optimist, you can say we pushed them pretty hard without either of our stars in the first round of the playoffs, harder than they expected anyway. But like the goal when you trade all the picks and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and all the swaps and everything and have a payroll the way it's been is not to win 1 playoff series, is to win 3 or 4. I believe they've won 3 combined in the entirety of the Kawhi Leonard, Paul George era. And just like, they're just never healthy at the same time when it matters. And so you either have to be content with being not good enough and keeping the draft picks and the young player stockpile where it is now and just being a pretty good team who maybe you get real lucky health wise and then do whatever you do, or you're not content because you're moving into a new arena. You've invested so much in these guys. You only have so many trade chips to invest further into this team the way it is. And you make a move for Harden or somebody else. I think Harden fits better than DeRozan to answer your question just because of his playmaking. But that's the question the Clippers face. And I think we're far. I think that I don't really think that there's been a whole lot of dialogue really for the last couple of months between these 2 teams.
No, I mean, and I think it goes back to like once we start playing real games and the standings start to dictate, and there's a sense of desperation, or if there's a sense of like, you know what, we are James Harden away from, knock on wood, if Kawhi and Paul stay healthy, and it costs us Terrence Mann. Maybe it doesn't, on September, whatever 5th, it doesn't cost you Terrence Mann, but on February 1st, it does, because we feel like we are a championship team. And Terrence Mann's going to be a free agent in the summer of 2025. And, we're going to take the risk on, going about doing that.
Has there been anything on Dame?
No, Dame's interesting. I think, there's been no conversations. It's been very quiet, certainly from the Miami front. I think there's the only way we hear more about Dame is if Dame makes it messy. And I don't think Damian Lillard right now is willing to make it messy in Portland.
I've heard, no, again, I was away for a while, but I've been back for a bit now, making calls and catching up with people. I've heard there's been nothing. I mean, like no meaningful dialogue at all. And more pointedly, and I know Brian Windhorst said something about this while I was on break, I just don't think there's been another team. I just don't. If there is, I don't know about it. And that could very well be the case. I may not know. But I have not heard of any other team that has really dove headlong or even halfway into the Dame Lillard sweepstakes, which is not really even a sweepstakes. If it's only one team and the team is not talking to the other team, there's no sweepstakes. Have you heard of any other?
No, none. I mean, certainly, we talked Philadelphia, they've been pretty steadfast that Maxi's not involved. It's interesting. Tim Bontemps, Kevin Pelton, myself, Andre Snellings have a piece coming out in the near future where we just kind of look at different teams and different scenarios, and you can run through them all. You can run through Toronto and some of these other teams here, but there's really nothing like everything has let's just say hypothetical, like Toronto says, you know what, we want Dame, but and we're willing to trade OG. For example, I'm just throwing it out there. Like, well, what does that do for Portland, where, you're basically going to have to max him. He's a potential free agent next year. So that's what you have to be comfortable with. And I think at the end of the day, what Miami has to offer, whether it be Hero, in Jovic and Jaquez, their first round pick this year.
Jovic playing well for Serbia, really by the way, in the World Cup.
Really well. And 2 first round picks or pick swaps. I think that's the best out there. And I think if you're Portland, you have to come to a realization, like, you know what, Hero, the 2 young players and draft picks is going to be better than what you will get. Like, that's like on July 1st, it's probably a C-level offer, but come closer to the start of camp, like that's going to be as good. And are you willing to hold on to Damian Lillard into the season for a guy who's missed a ton of games? Certainly some of that is due to them shutting him down. But there is that injury concern, for players 33 years old. The value and for Miami, you're thinking, like, who we actually bidding against? Like, we're not bidding against anybody here. Why are we going to overpay? What I mean is overpay is that all of a sudden we're thinking about, we're going to put Caleb Martin in the deal. All of a sudden we're going to call Oklahoma City and manipulate that draft pick. That's, we're going to now have 3 picks available to us because we're going to do something with that protection that's on there. But going back, there's been, there's been nothing at all here. And it's very different than I think, what happened last offseason with Kevin Durant, and then both sides came out and did a press release in mid-August saying that we're going to.
I forgot about that press release.
I think you might have been away.
It had the KD 35 boardroom logo and the Nets logo on it.
That is
right. Man, that thing should go in the Hall of Fame. Remember, I used to say that there should be like a Hall of Fame oddities wing, or like a wing of absurdity. That press conference should be there. That press release rather should be there somewhere.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different it's certainly a lot different than that here, but Dame did that interview with Mark Spears, for Antscape, and he was, Like he wasn't, he was very polite, I would say, during it, but he said, I don't want to talk about Portland. Like, I'm not talking about Portland here. So
there's not a lot of upside to him making public comments about the Blazers.
No, there isn't, because the league has already investigated, and certainly with Aaron Goodwin and whether he was telling teams he wouldn't be traded here. I always believe that Damian Lillard will report. Like, maybe I'm foolish, but if there's not a deal at the end of September, which I don't think there will be, I think Damian Lillard will. I think he'll be in training camp, and hopefully there's eventually something gets figured out here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to rehash everything, but we've gone through the teams that made any kind of theoretical sense. The 3-team trade with the Sixers, the Clippers, and the Blazers. Let's leave that aside. But like, I never thought Boston, for Jaylen Brown anyway, made any sense really. I always said that was almost a non-starter. Is there a Boston deal without that? Boston hasn't been active in this. New York, people bring up, Stephen A brings up all the time, and I've just said Jalen Brunson is pretty good. Like, I'm not upending the apple cart of draft picks that I've carefully cobbled together for another point guard who's 33 years old. I'm just not. That's not the guy. He's a very good player. He'd help my team in the short term. Maybe you could convince yourself like the East is open-ish enough that it's almost worth it. But I'm holding my cards if I'm.
Yeah, I mean, what you want is that, like, Brooklyn gets off to a great start. Like, that's what you want. Like, and we'll talk World Cup in a little while, but like, Bridges was awesome. Like, in the Italy game, like, you want that.
You got teed up for taunting their bench after yet another.
I tell you what,
3-pointer.
I'm getting off course here, but man, I miss the days when coaches got dressed up, because those Italians look nice. I know you're shaking your head over here. They had those nice Armani suits on there. No, there is going on within the league a
coup, a pushback, a movement among a very vocal and passionate minority to bring the suits back to the sidelines. I am on team casual. I think they found the right balance of like uniformity with casual, looks official enough. But look, some people like to look nice. I don't like to look nice. I like to look like a schlub. So I may be, yeah, but Mikal Bridges is playing great. I think I had his stats up before. I think he's shooting like 68% or something in let me bring it up now because I have it here. His Mikal Bridges is shooting 63%, 74% on twos, and 50% on threes for Team USA. He's the second leading scorer on the team, actually.
Yeah. So if you're Portland and you want Brooklyn to be like the 3 seed come closer to the trade deadline, like you want them being up there in the top 4 where they said, you know what, we weren't willing to do Damian Lillard in July. Now we are. Now we're willing to give up whatever the 4 first-round picks and whatever the players, Dinwiddie and whatever filler to get that. And so that's like kind of what, that would be the mindset of teams that weren't in the Lillard chase, or I guess none of the outside of Miami, that you want teams to play well, thinking that they are, one player closer to winning a championship.
Yeah, I have in my notes here, Brooklyn has always been the wild card to me in this because they have everything you would need. And Dame has publicly kind of lusted after Bridges as a teammate that he would, along with Bam Adebayo, that he would like to play with. My sense, and I've said this before, is I think the Nets would have a pretty robust internal debate about whether Dame is the guy to go for it with, or look, we just went through all this organizational trauma and we've actually come out the other side in pretty decent position. Can we just chill and see what we have? Maybe bide our time for a player who's a little younger. I think there are definitely people within the organization who would lean that direction. And they've been linked as a potential third team in Dame trades, right? Like a place where Hero can go.
Hero.
Maybe Simmons
and even going back to Hero, like if I was Portland, and I know we talked at length about draft picks, like I would be fine with taking Hero back in a deal. And like, if it's, if it makes it less one, if it's only 2 first-round picks and 3 first rounds, and then figure out like Hero, Simons, like maybe you pivot off one of those two guys eventually later here. Like I don't think it's a deal breaker that you have Anthony Simons on your roster with 3 years left on his contract, and you're getting another guy like Tyler Hero back, another, a guard who's got 4 years left. Like do it and then kind of figure it out later.
You mentioned Toronto. I think Portland and Toronto had some very vague and like preliminary is probably not the right word, but just like the kind of dialogue you have with every team at the draft. I think they had at the draft, but I don't think that was about Dame going to Toronto. I think it was about something else related. Maybe like a way Portland could have restocked around Dame, but that never really went anywhere serious. And I don't see Toronto necessarily as a Dame fit, particularly they owe that pick to San Antonio that's protected for several years out because of the Pirtle.
Well, that's the other thing. Like if you're going to draft, if you ever were in the Dame conversation, like you want to trade more draft picks for him, and then all of a sudden, like Siakam leaves next year, and you're like, I got Damian Lillard for $200 million left on his deal.
Or Toronto, by the way, now you got me going on a bunch of his sides.
Well, Toronto they're my ultimate wild card. Like they're
you mentioned training camp and like all these teams, like what will happen at training camp. Toronto strikes me as a place where if like, and this is not based on any intel, this is just my personal speculation to be clear, where like if something interesting happened in the next 6 weeks with the Raptors, I would not be surprised because the Siakam stuff has kind of died down, but his situation contractually remains the same. OG Anunoby is going to be a free agent. And the little, like every year around this time, I do a deep dive on all 30 rosters just for myself. Do it by position, draft capital. It just helps me get ready for the season. I did Toronto's the other day, and I was like, "What? I forgot the Gary Trent opt-in." And then all this reporting that came right after that, like an extension was coming, and I was like, "Wait, that never happened. Like the Gary Trent extension never happened. Is it still happening?" I poked around on that a little bit. Just a lot of balls in the air for the Raptors, and maybe nothing happens. Maybe they just go through the season as is and play it out. But there's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff.
Well, and you didn't even mention the one thing, and you were out of the country during this. Is the whole, and this hasn't been resolved yet. Is the stuff with the Knicks,
the lawsuit
that I'm, like I was when that happened, I was like the most popular man in Toronto. I had people calling me, "Hey, can you talk?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know what I can talk about here. I mean, like it is what it is, right?" I mean, like. When you hire somebody and you leave a company, usually, you're not really bringing a flash drive of thousands of plays.
Well, on the one hand, yes. Okay. And I've read the complaint and I've read the news around it and all that. I haven't logged into my, court stuff to see if there's been any follow-up. I don't think there has been yet. That was the one. So on the one hand, it sounds like, oh my God, a lawsuit. It's like all this cloak and dagger, intel, flash drives, dates of importance, and all that. And then you look at like what is alleged to have been given to the Raptors, and it's like plays on synergy and like some game plan stuff. I was like, I could get that. Like that's not that interesting. But who knows what the hell will happen. The other thing you mentioned, Ben Simmons, and Mark Spears did a great interview with Ben Simmons on Anscape, one of the first big public interviews Ben Simmons has given in a long time. And he talked about how he feels healthy now. And, taking Ben Simmons at his word, I do think, and I've been guilty of it too, the health issues that he talks about, I think have been not given the level of serious consideration that, again, taking him at his word, that they deserve. Because he's talking about how he couldn't jump off his knee, he couldn't put any pressure on it, he couldn't get any elevation. He's obviously had back issues. He's told the story about how he couldn't get up the stairs one day. And I think in the rush, and I've been guilty of it too, to not I wouldn't say I've ever ridiculed Ben Simmons, others have, but just sort of nitpick his game, possession by possession, game after game. Perk is like he doesn't have the dog in him. I do think we kind of skirt over those injuries in a way that we wouldn't for other players. On the other hand, there's one question that I would ask Ben Simmons, just one, and that I would want, and this, I won't ever interview him probably in a big sit-down situation because this would be the first question I'd ask him is, are you afraid to get fouled? or do you think you can make half your free throws? That's the only question that I don't like. It's if he's healthier, that's awesome. If he feels like he's going to be a point guard again, which by the way is interesting, is he going to start for the Nets? If he starts, who's coming out of the starting?
I have him as like the backup. I have him coming off the bench.
I would guess he's expecting to start based on his public comments. Does that mean Dinwiddie's coming off the bench? Is Finney Smith coming off the bench? Who's coming off the bench? That's great. But because you talked about how, like, I'm not going to be the dribble handoff guy. That's not who I am. I'm a point guard. I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Awesome. Like, if you think you can do that, he even talked about extending his range. And every time he talks about jump shooting, I just want to put that one to bed. So we don't want to hear that. I don't want to see the videos from the Sixers practice facility of you shooting threes. I don't care. It never happens. Never happens. Fine. But if you think you're going to have a great year, that's awesome. The one question that I want to hear, and the only one that matters, is, are you afraid to get fouled? Because if he's afraid to get fouled, nothing else matters. It's you become an offensive zero again. And defensively, he's really, really good. But Ben Simmons at the 5 doesn't work. He's too small. He doesn't rebound enough. He's not a rim protector like Draymond to do that full time. And Simmons plus Claxton died on the vine last year because of spacing issues. So I just thought that interview was interesting. You have any other takeaways from that?
I thought the most interesting thing is that he came out and said that he's just started playing 2-on-2.
I forgot about that part.
I thought that was pretty interesting. That part of it, like, we haven't seen him, and certainly we're still in the off season. Like, he has not been playing. He has not been, I don't know, cleared, but to play 5-on-5, and that he's been playing a lot of 2-on-2. I think that was probably the most. I don't, whatever he says about dominating, I don't really care. But that part was interesting to me.
Yeah, I would settle for just shooting 70% at the free throw line. Dominating, we can leave to the side.
Yep.
Team USA in Manila right now has made the semifinals of the FIBA World Cup. We've already qualified for the Olympics. Our Olympic team will look at least a little different than the team that is trying to win the World Cup. I actually quite like this team. I've been texting with some of the people that are over there about, I like the construction of it. I think the starting 5, which everyone knows has kind of been shaky. I think it's a little short on playmaking.
Yeah.
And that's why the team seems to come to life whenever Halliburton and Reeves come in.
And he did in the Italy game. I think it was 10-8, and Halliburton came. I think they switched lineups, and Halliburton came in and gave him a really nice boost. To that group.
Yeah, if there are two, like, Bridges has been awesome and was awesome today.
Yep.
If I'm a Pacers fan, Halliburton's only averaging 9 a game, but he's blowing away everybody in assists, and he's shooting the hell out of it from everywhere. If I'm a Pacers fan, I'm so excited by how Halliburton looks. Now, teams go at him a little bit on defense, but his on-ball screen navigation defense is just so he gets hung up. But he's working, and he's working hard on switches, because when Banchero's in the game at the 5, or even when Jaren Jackson was in the game, which he's never in the game because he has 2 fouls 2 minutes into every game. Sometimes we started switching more against Lithuania to try to take them out of their pick and roll game. Lithuania beat us by shooting 14 and 25 from 3. I say I get into we mode talking about Team USA. My wife doesn't like that, by the way. When I start dropping us and we for Team USA, it doesn't go over great.
I probably wouldn't go over well at the dinner table. Can you believe we shot 10 of 17? She's probably looking at you like, what are you talking about?
I also was doing that. We watched a lot of Women's World Cup on,
I did that too.
Because my daughter is super into it.
When they missed the because I was awake and my wife was sleeping, and I was so mad after penalty kicks, and I said to my wife, can you believe we didn't make 2 out? And she's like, who's we? Like, when did you become a soccer fan?
I still can't believe that whole shootout, by the way. I still don't understand, like, how the ball went in. I guess it went in or went in enough. By the way, ultimate badass moment. And I haven't watched enough soccer to know how common or uncommon this is. When the goalies come up to take penalty kicks, it happened in another game too. I can't remember whose team it was that had a guy. I think it was men. Australia's goalie maybe came up.
Well,
and
I
made a
saw it
kick.
it was in Inter Miami. Is that Messi's team?
Yeah,
I
Miami,
believe there was a shootout, and the goalie for Miami was kicking.
That's badass. That's badass when the goalie gets up and like, all right, I got to do this. I got to give me a break from the most high stress part of my whole career. I'm going to just make a penalty kick now as an offensive player. Let me show you how it's done. I don't know. I'd be thrilled if I were a Pacers fan. And I know Ant has, he's missed some passes here or there, both on the ball and some extra passes where he could ping it around. If I'm a Wolves fan, I just absolutely love how he's playing. Like, he is so physically dominant. Teams are not even going under screens against him anymore because they have enough respect for his jumper, and the FIBA 3 is a little shorter. He looks smooth. His jump shot he's only shooting 33% from 3, but he's taking a lot. They look good. The long 2 is reliable. I think he's defending really, really hard. On the ball, he tried to bring us back against Lithuania, pressuring everybody. Off the ball, he guarded Vucevic for a little while against Montenegro when Team USA tried to use Jaren Jackson Jr. as a rover instead of the guy guarding Vucevic. He was if I'm a Wolves fan, I'm like, look, Gobert did not, to put it politely, did not have a good World Cup. That trade is going to go down as a disaster. But Towns looked good for the DR, and Ant looks like so much like the guy that I'm beyond excited. The team is look, I know whenever Team USA loses, there's this like, oh my God, they lost. They're 5-1 with an average scoring margin of plus 25. It hasn't been a murderer's row of opponents. And if we play Germany, we're playing the winner of Germany, Latvia in the next round. Germany has beaten the doors off of almost everyone.
And Germany probably should have beaten the United States in that pre-qualifier. And I think they kind of had a little bit of a deer in the headlights in the fourth quarter there.
And they rolled Slovenia, which is not easy. So we're going, the semifinals are not going to be easy by any means. Like, that'll be a good game. But 5-1 with that scoring margin, like, that's kind of it in 2023. It's kind of what you expect for Team USA without, I don't know, 10 of the 25 best NBA players. 8 of the 25 best NBA players.
I think NBA or basketball is a little bit different than soccer.
I should say American NBA players. Obviously, many of the best NBA players are not American and thus play for other teams.
Yeah, and it's like, the United States gets judged by the Olympics at the end of the day, really, as far as winning a gold medal. It's different than soccer, where I think the World Cup is more, certainly the dominant of the two stages here. They qualify for the Olympics as well as Canada did. I think that's the goal. I think that certainly winning a gold in the World Cup is one of them, but I think getting to the, where you don't have to go through the qualifying rounds next year.
And the other thing I've liked about Ant and Josh Hart, who's starting, I love Josh Hart, but nobody is guarding him on the perimeter, and he's not making enough threes. He's taking 1 3 a game to make them pay for it. But him and Ant and Bridges, the level of off-ball movement that's happening, and you expect it from Bridges and you expect it from Hart. You don't necessarily expect it from Anthony Edwards when Jalen Brunson is running the show. He's making a lot of little subtle cuts along the baseline and also just kind of lifting up on the perimeter from like the wing to the top of the arc. And the attention he drew doing that today against Italy during a Jalen Brunson pick and roll got Josh Hart a back cut layup. I just like Ant is kind of rounding out his game. The scoring gets all the attention. He had 35 against Lithuania, almost single-handedly got us back into the lead, got us within 4. It's the rounding out of his game has been interesting to me. Even like a guy like Brandon Ingram, who's really struggled, who's been kind of vocally unhappy at times about his role. I feel like he's still playing the right way and not really not forcing it, not hunting points. And I got to tell you, his numbers aren't going to blow you away because he's coming off the bench. I love what Banchero has been doing as a backup 5, as sometimes the 4 playing next to Bobby Porter. So you have a Walker Kessler. He just looks so explosive, so fast, and so confident. Like when he's the center and they give him the ball at the top of the arc and like let him kind of run the offense real briefly, and he does his fake handoff drive, whatever, he looks like awesome.
No, I agree. I mean, I think, I think the Italian game, I think there was certainly a purpose, and that second unit that was with Banchero and Halliburton. I think they were, certainly difference makers here. I think it's going to be interesting, and this will be a conversation for next year as far as who stays. And it's just a matter of what of the NBA elite are going to want to play in Spain, because it's in France. I mean, because it's hard for me to see like Jaren Jackson on this team. It really is. I mean, it's guys like that. And I think that will be the interesting thing as far as for next year.
I thought Jaren Jackson got off to an okay start in the World Cup. Defensively, you can see how scared people are of him, just as they are in the NBA. I mean, when he's the drop man in pick and roll, our on-ball defender, so the guy guarding the ball handler, has gotten a lot of steals by dipping back into the passing lane from the ball handler to Jaren Jackson's guy rolling to the rim, dipping into that passing lane much earlier than you'd see in the NBA, because that player, that defender, knows the guy with the ball does not want to shoot over Jaren Jackson Jr., and he's going to pass it, and they've gotten steals because of that. But he's just fouled too much. He hasn't been on the court, and his rebounding, he just hasn't done a good job protecting the glass. And it's not even just because he's chasing block shots, which he does sometimes. There were a couple times against Italy where he did nothing. He didn't try to block a shot, and he didn't box out and kind of got overpowered. Like, that just hasn't been good enough. And frankly, I kind of thought his pick and pop three, particularly with the shorter line, would be a little bit of a weapon, at least, or something that defenses would have to be concerned about. He's not shooting very many of them, and defenses do not care at all. And he hasn't made very many.
No, I think we saw a lot more in the pre-qualifying games. We haven't seen really anything from that, during, at least
he's made two threes. He's 2 of 7 from three.
Yeah, in group play, and then certainly in the quarters.
Halliburton 14 of 25 on threes. Just a show. That dude is a show. He's a showman. The Pacers are going to be fun this year with just running and gunning, Obi Toppin. I think people are getting a little ahead of their skis on just the sort of talent that they have. Like, they'll be okay, but they're going to be fun to watch. And obviously Austin Reeves has been an international sensation, although it was interesting to see Lithuania kind of beat the hell out of him.
And Italy tried doing the same thing. Italy tried going after him again too. And Italy's, certainly smaller group. And, but yeah, that's going to be interesting if the United States gets Germany, as far as if they, targeting, Austin Reeves.
And by the way, I don't mean to disrespect Latvia. Latvia has been really good. I believe they just beat Serbia, right? No, they didn't. They beat Serbia in group play. They beat somebody good in group play. And obviously they ended France with just a rollicking come from behind fourth quarter win. They're playing really, really well. On paper, they're just not as good as Germany. And on the other side of the bracket looms Serbia versus the winner of Slovenia and Canada. So a lot of the heavyweights, despite Spain being out and France being out, are still here. And so the World Cup, which is happening a whole world away, is about to get very interesting for people who haven't tuned in. Like, U.S. will have, whether it's semifinals and finals or semifinals and consolation game, are going to have 2 really good games to finish out this tournament. Any other Team USA thoughts?
No, I mean, I don't have anything. Well, I think it's a very easy team to root for. I think Grant Hill did a really good job putting this group together. They went out after they lost to Lithuania, and everyone's like, "Wait a minute, why didn't they address their? They certainly got out rebounded, and the lack of bigs was there." And I was thinking, like, well, what bigs out there were there to select from? Like, what American bigs were? The Embiid situation is still kind of hanging over as far as what happens next year here. But I think they did as best as they could.
Now, this is an interesting thought exercise. American centers, there's Anthony Davis, right? But he's a guy like that is not going to play, of this stature, is not going to play in this tournament, particularly with his injury history.
No, you're looking at like Jared Allen, Nick Claxton, right? Guys like that. Probably.
I think they looked at Jared Allen. I don't know how seriously,
because he was there. Was he there for a qualifying Was he? Oh no, he was there for the World Cup, right?
Maybe
last time.
yes,
maybe?
he was, I think.
Yeah.
And Bam Adebayo
Yeah.
would help on the glass. That's that's one. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, Draymond, if he wants to play in the Olympics, I think we'll get some look. Yeah. Walker Kessler's not playing much. Towns is playing for the Dominican. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Brook Lopez would help with size and glass. He's old though. Brook Lopez is old. Got paid a lot of money, man. 2 years, $48 million for Brook Lopez. Good for him. Good for him. Rockets still salty about not getting Brook Lopez. One of the hottest. So there were a couple of hot takes in the last 72 to 96 hours that I haven't addressed. One was Rich Paul saying on Gilbert Arenas' podcast, Gil's Arena, that LeBron had it tougher than Michael Jordan because of the 24/7 news landscape. I'm just going to steer right around that one because I don't particularly care, to be honest with you, who had it quote unquote tougher and why. The one that got a lot of traction that I didn't expect was when Noah Lyles, the track star, went at NBA players, or I guess American professional sports leagues, for referring to their championship teams as world champions. It said champions of the world. When did you beat the world? You just beat your league. Do you have any react? That got a lot of I didn't expect that to be a thing. That was kind of fun.
Oh, the brothers of the NBA banded together, and I saw it was a Devin Booker and KD, and there was a list of them here. Listen, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I guess what we could say 150 out of the 450 players are from other countries, right? So this is not a strictly American league where it's all American players here. So this is a world type league here. I think if you sent Denver over to play maybe Real Madrid, or I don't know, I mean, that's how we get. I guess that's how we determine it, right? We send them.
Well, I was going to say, when are you allowed to be world champions? So is the FIBA World Cup world champions? I guess you're world champions. If
guess.
You win the Olympics, are you Olympic champions or world champions?
I guess if you win, I guess it has to be that if you win the World Cup, you're determined world champs or the Olympics. Not the NBA, because it's it's infiltrated by a lot of non-Americans.
NBA champions is fine.
But that got these guys going. That got them going.
You'll be surprised to know that I don't really have a lot of emotion to give this one. I thought it was kind of funny. I think NBA champions is fine if it's going to really annoy people around the world. And I don't know that every team does it, right? I think actually if we looked banner by banner, like team by team, I do think some NBA teams, their banners say NBA champions and others say world champions. Do any say world's champions? That was always a grammatical debate that I would have with buddies. We're world champions or the world's
now when you're
champion.
When you're in crypto in November, Zach Lowe, and you have to look up at the banners and see, they might actually say world champions. I have a feeling the LA Lakers.
I don't care. I mean, if you're the NBA champion, you are the best professional basketball team in the world.
Yeah.
So if you want to say world champions, fine. NBA champion to me suffices. I just don't know what you're supposed to say when you are allowed to say world champion. Is the FIBA World Cup winner is the world champion of this year, and then I just thought it was kind of funny that these guys, that everybody got very fired up about a semantics issue.
It was good for late August banter. It certainly was.
Is there anything we should have talked about with Giannis? I mean, I know we talked about his comments being important and the extension.
I think there's a lot of, I won't go long and says, listen, he's extension eligible starting September 22nd. We all agreed that there was no reason for him to sign. It's a 3-year extension. I have it at 169. I know people have reported at 173. No, who cares? At the end of the day, he's not signing the extension because in reality, it's only 2 years of new money, right? When you look at the opt-in number, the opt-in number is basically being replaced by another, like a $2 million more in salary. So it's 2 million, 2 years more. I think next year will be more interesting because technically he'll be going into the last year of his contract. I think the biggest thing with Giannis is what's going to happen in late February with Drew Holiday. I think that because that is when Drew Holiday is extension eligible.
You nailed it.
Without an extension, he goes into free agency in 2024 is probably the top. Him and certainly some of the restricted guys, Tyrese Maxey, one of them as the top point guard here. I think that is going to be interesting to what happens with him. But the article that was in the New York Times is just interesting based on not the extension part, but the other comments, right? Like as far as what this team will be look like, because the reality of it is an older team. You brought back Chris Middleton, you brought back Brook Lopez. I thought did a nice job with their bench. Certainly guys like Malik Beasley, they were able to sign for the minimum, and they brought in they re-signed Crowder, and they still have Bobby Portis, guys like that here. Point guard depth is, I would say, probably questionable there.
I would go so far as to say non-existent.
Yeah.
You could argue, who cares? Because
right.
Drew Holiday is kind of a point guard. Chris Middleton is often a point forward.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the story of the team. Is Middleton's got to be back to being Middleton, who played well in the playoffs, but he's got to be.
Yeah.
When the going gets tough, we can hand him the ball and feel good. And Giannis is point Giannis sometimes too.
Yeah, I mean, so I would, if you're Milwaukee, I wouldn't get caught up that he's not signing it. I just think we've talked about, like, you pay attention to where you have a rookie coach in Adrian Griffin. I mean, that's the reality of it. Where
Giannis helped pick.
Yeah, where you are during the year, and I think the Holiday possible extension in late February. I think you circled that, and you just kind of it's kind of like a day by day world as far as the temperature of Giannis.
And also, whether Holiday extends in February or not, how these guys perform in the playoffs. Because Drew Holiday offensively in the playoffs, even the year they won the title, was shaky. And the years around that has not been good enough for as great as he is defensively. And part of that is he's guarding the best guys and expending so much energy doing that. Yeah. And we saw the team just fall on its face so many times last year against Miami. And then, you can tell me Giannis was hurt. The team still was up by 20, 15, 16 in these games, in these fourth quarters, and could not do anything offensively. So we'll see. All right, Bobby Marks. Bobby Marks. We didn't get to it because
it won't come out till I think next week. We're in this NFL period here, but we've got a big Supermax article coming out. I think next week. What is that? The week of the 12th, I think, week of the 11th. Where this year is historic, man. Like I haven't seen it this top heavy of potential guys. We've got 8 guys potentially could be Supermax eligible based on if they are an All NBA. This upcoming year, and it certainly starts with Luka, who could sign in 2025.
If Luka's healthy, he's making All NBA.
And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is another player because he had made it this past year, so that would be 2 years in a row. And then you're looking at De'Aaron Fox and Jamal Murray and Bam Adebayo, Brandon Ingram, Pascal Siakam, I think is interesting, certainly. And then Jaren Jackson based on Defensive Player of the Year. I think what's going to be interesting, Zach, is what happens. Some of those players, the Bams, the Jackson, Siakams, will be impacted by positionless voting. I mean, that's the reality of it here, where there's no center for Bam Adebayo, where he might have to rely on winning like Defensive Player of the Year, which is part of the criteria.
Well, they also may. I was talking to someone about this, kind of more on the players' side. They also may be helped by the 65 game minimum threshold, because that is going to take some of the older players out of it due to rest. And you're like one ankle sprain away from you rest 8 games, you're injured 8 games, you're out.
Yeah.
And a lot of these younger guys who maybe don't have the rest games built in are going to maybe be elevated in part because of that. Jamal Murray, I believe, is extension eligible now.
Yeah,
right? He
is. He's 3 for 144 up until October 23rd. So is Donovan Mitchell, which I don't see that happening either in Cleveland. And you're right. I mean, the rest factor is the game's criteria, because some of the older players, it doesn't matter to them, right? They've already hit the 10 years of service. There's All NBA type. It's basically just the honor of being named All NBA. There's no
I don't think LeBron is gunning for 65 games.
No, it doesn't matter. There's not an added bonus except that it's part of you. It's added to your resume now.
You mentioned Luka would not sign till 2025.
Yeah, so Luka and Gilgeous-Alexander, it's kind of like I guess we call it the Jason Tatum rule, where they will meet the criteria, but they'll only have 6 years of service. So you have to have 7 years of service, but they'll still be eligible the following year because will have hit it 2 out of 3 years here.
No matter what happens.
Yeah, no matter what happens.
And so for those who hit it, that extension kicks in after the expiration of your current deal. So you can sign it the moment you're eligible.
Yeah.
But it gets tacked onto the guaranteed seasons on your current
total
deal.
of 6 years, including what's left.
Those guys, there's some interesting like De'Aaron Fox. Did he make it last year?
Yeah.
He made it, right? I voted for him, I think.
Like Luka could be, I mean, who knows
that.
where these numbers, Luka's going to be probably the first $80 million guy.
Look, if Luka's, of all those guys, if Luka's healthy, he's making all NBA. Like he's just going to have the numbers. He's going to be enormously central to his team's success. If he's healthy, he's pretty much a lock.
Yep.
If SGA puts up numbers like that again and stays healthy, he's going to be a borderline lock. I had him first team last year. Ingram feels like a long shot that may be helped by the 65 game thing. Bam, look, man, center, it's like, it's Jokic and Embiid take 2 out of 3 spots if they meet the 65 game mark. It leaves one spot, and it's
no, because it's positionless, right?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so that's the whole. Like I said with Bam, it might be Defensive Player of the Year.
Oh boy! All right, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Bobby Marks, we got a lot to talk about. We got a lot of time to do it. We will have you back soon. It's good to see you. Enjoy New York City, and maybe the next time we talk, someone will have been traded to somewhere where they will be happier.
Hopefully, it's not Wednesday morning because I'm flying home. So if we can,
I think you're going to be. I think you're going to be safe. Bobby Marks, everybody. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Zach.